One by one, they felt the cold grip of unseen hands pulling at them, dragging them toward the graves. Lisa was the first to fall. Her screams echoed through the forest as she was pulled into the earth, her fingers clawing at the ground until she disappeared. Hi, this is Mim. Welcome to Spooky Earth. Today we delve into the chilling tale of haunted Appalachian Mountains, the Forest of Shadows. Join me as we explore a story where a group of friends, lost in the dense forests of the Appalachians, face terrifying, unseen forces. Let's dive in. A group of friends, Mark, Sarah, Jason, Lisa, and Kevin, decided to spend their vacation hiking in the dense, untouched forests of the Appalachian Mountains. Excitement buzzed through the air as they loaded their gear and set off early one crisp morning, eager to escape the monotony of city life. The first few hours of their hike were idyllic. The sun filtered through the canopy of leaves, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. They laughed and joked, marveling at the beauty around them. But as the day wore on, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. The forest seemed to grow denser, darker, and the trail less discernible. By late afternoon, they realized they were lost. "Didn't we pass that tree before?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Impossible. We've been heading north," Mark replied, consulting his map, though his confidence was waning. They were exhausted from hours of hiking in circles. They decided to set up camp for this night. "It's too dangerous in the jungle." As the group gathered around a small fire, its flickering light barely penetrating the surrounding gloom, an eerie stillness settled over the forest. They chatted nervously, trying to lift their spirits. "Let's tell some ghost stories," Kevin suggested, attempting to inject some levity into the tense atmosphere. "Not like we need to," Jason muttered, eyeing the shadows warily. "This place feels haunted enough." Sarah shivered and moved closer to the fire. "Can we please talk about something less creepy?" Just as she spoke, the temperature seemed to drop. The fire's warmth barely reached them, and a cold breeze whispered through the trees, carrying faint, unintelligible murmurs. "Did you hear that?" Lisa whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Hear what?" Mark asked, though he too had noticed the strange sounds. The murmurs grew louder, transforming into distinct, desperate whispers. The friends looked at each other, fear etched on their faces. "Maybe it's the wind," Mark suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Suddenly the fire flickered and dimmed, casting grotesque shadows on the surrounding trees. The whispers turned into chilling laughter, and the ground beneath them seemed to tremble. "What the hell is happening?" Kevin shouted, standing up and looking around frantically. A sharp, icy wind gusted through the camp, extinguishing the fire. The darkness closed in, and they could barely see each other. Panic set in as they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching, though no one was visible. They couldn't handle those paranormal activities and fainted on the ground. The next morning, they woke up and tried to figure out what happened last night. They found themselves in a graveyard. They understood something wasn't right, but still thought they were dreaming. Lisa was so scared she wanted to move, but Jason was so badly injured he couldn't move, so they decided to stay there. They were preparing for camping and serving when, in the graveyard, they found a small hut a little bit far from their camp and the graveyard. They went over there and found out the house was used for black magic rituals. Inside, they discovered a letter. The letter detailed the history of the graveyard and the small village. It revealed that once, a witch had lived in that house. She had tricked and captured villagers, killing them to perform black magic. She had created the graveyard to form an army of the dead. The letter warned that if the dead were disturbed, they would kill whoever was in their path. The revelation from the letter sent chills down their spines. The realization that they were in a place tainted by such dark history made their current situation even more horrifying. "But where can we go?" Sarah asked, glancing nervously at Jason, who was still lying on the ground, wincing in pain. Mark knelt beside Jason, examining his injuries. "We have to find a way to help him first. We can't move him like this." Kevin, trying to keep his composure, suggested, "Maybe there's something in the hut that can help us. Supplies, medicine, anything." Reluctantly, they all agreed. They carefully carried Jason to the hut, making sure not to further aggravate his injuries. Once inside, they began searching through the remnants of the witch's past. Old books, strange symbols, and unsettling artifacts filled the small space. In a dusty corner, Sarah found a small box containing some basic medical supplies. "This might help," she said, holding up a roll of bandages and a few vials of mysterious liquids. While Mark tended to Jason's wounds, the others continued to explore the hut. Lisa found an old, tattered journal that seemed to belong to the witch. As she flipped through the pages, she noticed detailed accounts of the rituals and spells the witch had performed. One entry caught her attention. "To awaken the army of the dead, one must disturb the graves and chant the incantation. But beware, for the spirits will seek revenge upon those who disrupt their slumber." "This is terrifying," Lisa whispered, showing the journal to the others. Kevin, who had been searching another corner of the hut, found a map. "Look at this," he said, spreading it out on a table. "It shows the layout of the graveyard and the surrounding forest. There's a marked path leading to what looks like a safe area." Mark glanced at the map and then at Jason, whose wounds were now bandaged. "We need to follow this path and get out of here, but we have to be careful not to disturb anything else." As they prepared to leave, a sudden chill filled the air. The shadows in the hut seemed to grow darker, and the faint sound of whispers returned, echoing through the room. "We need to go now," Sarah urged, helping Jason to his feet. They carefully exited the hut and made their way back through the graveyard, following the map's path. The forest was eerily quiet, every sound amplified by their heightened senses. They moved cautiously, aware that any misstep could unleash the wrath of the spirits. They turned to leave, but the forest seemed to close in around them. It was as if the graveyard was drawing them in, refusing to let them go. The air grew cold, and a heavy silence descended. Then the whispers began. At first, they thought it was the wind rustling through the trees, but the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They could hear voices murmuring unintelligible words, growing more urgent and desperate. "What is that?" Kevin shouted, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," Mark yelled back. They began to run, but no matter which direction they took, they always found themselves back at the graveyard. Panic set in, and the whispers turned into wails, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. Suddenly, Jason screamed. He fell to the ground, clutching his leg where deep, bloody scratches had appeared. "Something grabbed me," he cried, terror etched on his face. Mark and Kevin helped him up, but the moment they touched him, they too felt a sharp, icy pain sear through their bodies. They looked down to see similar scratches appearing on their arms and legs, as if invisible claws were raking their flesh. We need to stay together, Sarah said, her voice trembling but determined. They huddled together, their backs to each other, trying to ward off whatever was attacking them, but it was no use. One by one, they felt the cold grip of unseen hands pulling at them, dragging them toward the graves. Lisa was the first to fall. Her screams echoed through the forest as she was pulled into the earth, her fingers clawing at the ground until she disappeared. Jason and Kevin soon followed, their bodies vanishing into the dark soil, as if the graveyard itself was consuming them. Mark and Sarah, now alone and desperate, ran blindly through the forest. The whispers turned into mocking laughter, the trees seeming to reach out with gnarled branches to trip them. "We have to keep going," Mark panted, though his strength was waning. Finally, they stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. They burst inside and slammed the door shut, breathing heavily. The whispers stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. For a moment, they thought they were safe, but then they heard it, a slow, deliberate creaking coming from the floorboards. Mark grabbed a rusted iron poker from the fireplace, brandishing it like a weapon. Sarah clutched his arm, her eyes wide with fear. The floorboards gave way, and a skeletal hand emerged, followed by another. The ground beneath them opened up, revealing a mass grave filled with decayed bodies. The spirits of those buried there clawed their way out, their hollow eyes fixed on Mark and Sarah. With a final scream, Mark swung the poker, but it passed through the specters harmlessly. They reached out, their cold, bony fingers closing around his throat. Sarah watched in horror as he was pulled into the darkness. Left alone, Sarah backed into a corner, her mind fraying at the edges. She knew she wouldn't survive the night. The last thing she saw was the spirits closing in on her, their laughter echoing in her ears as they dragged her into the abyss. Days later, a search party found the abandoned campsite and the old graveyard, but there was no sign of the friends. The forest remained silent, holding its dark secrets close. The townsfolk whispered of the curse, warning others to stay away, lest they too become victims of the forest of shadows. Thank you for joining me on this spine-tingling journey. If you enjoyed this story and want more, make sure to stay connected with Spooky Earth. Subscribe, like, and share to keep the chills coming. Do you have a horror story that you think could send shivers down our spines? Share it with us at this email, and I might just bring your tale to life right here on Spooky Earth. Until next time, stay curious and keep your lights on. There's always another story waiting to unfold in the shadows of nights.